Hello friends, in this video we are going to cover the topic of new criticism and we will see that who were the leading figures of this theory. New criticism emerged in 1930 and it sustained in 1960 till 1960. And the major figures of this theory are T.S. Eliot, I.A. Richard, William Emerson and William Wimsatt and Beardsley. They were the people who had a major role in this theory. It emerged in 1930 in North America, and it is a text-centric approach. Means that we don't have to see that the art should portray universe or it should be author-centric or it should be reader-centric. It instead it says that we have to focus on the text in order to get meaning out of it. So it says that the work of literature is self-contained and self-referential object, that the meaning is contained within the text and it is self-referential, meaning that we don't have to refer to any external source for the meaning, not to the author, not to the reader, and not to the universe, and not to any ideological concept. Instead we have to focus on the text itself. New critics perform a close reading, concentrating on the relationships within the text that give it its own distinctive character or form. New critics emphasize that the structure of a work should not be divorced from meaning, viewing the two as constituting a quasi-organic unity. It says that the overall the literary work is made of words in which the several literary and figurative devices are used. So we have to see that how the literary devices have a separate meaning in itself and how these meaning interrelate with each other, and by interrelating how they make our organic whole in which there is a unified meaning of the text. So it focuses on close reading in which we see the syntax, the morphology, the diction, the relation of words with each other, and then it makes an organic whole in which there is a unified meaning of the text. The new criticism came after World War, and T.S. Eliot wrote his essays after the First World War. So it was the time when so many people died in thousands of numbers. So new critics came when overall humanity was feeling alienated and they were feeling fragmented. So new critics, they said that there are two desires. There were two poles at that time. The one pole had the desire to reconcile with the historic sense and to appreciate the literary work and to have that particular taste of those classics. So they had the taste and they said that they can reconcile with the historic sense of the past. And there was the other group in which they had the desire to see the literary work separate from any context, without any help of the socio-cultural condition and without seeing the author and the reader. The second group, they said that we should see the literary work removed from every context. So the first had the desire to reconcile with their past, then the second group, they had the desire to see the literary work apart from everything. The first group and the first desire is seen in the work of the T.S. Eliot, which is portrayed through his famous essay, which is the Tradition and Historic Sense, in which he values the tradition in the historic sense, and he loves the classics in the past. While on the other hand, we have the second group, which is reflected in the writings of I.A. Richard. The first new critic, I would say, is T.S. Eliot, and T.S. Eliot is famous for his poems like the love song of Alfred J. Prufrock and The Waste Land, in which he depicts the horrors of the World War. He wrote an essay in 1919 titled as Tradition and Individual Talent, and in that essay he celebrates the tradition. He says that the historic sense involves a perception not only the pastiness of the past but of its present. According to T.S. Eliot, the author must have the admiration for the tradition and he should have a particular historic sense, and he says that the historic sense can only be achieved if the author does not separate himself from the patterns that are followed in the past. He has to obey those particular patterns. He can show his historic sense by admiring the patterns that are followed by his fellow writers in the past. For example, if the particular author has to write poetry in the form of sonnet, then he can show his historic sense by following the particular pattern of the sonnet. And he should also know that whatever he is doing, it is also becoming past, and it would shape the future writers to write something. He says, no poet, no artist of any art has his complete meaning alone. His significance, his appreciation, is the appreciation of his relationship to the dead poets and artists. You cannot value him alone, you must set him for contrast and comparison among the dead. So he says that no poet and artist has value alone. His value and his importance lies when he is compared with other authors. So he must follow the historic sense, and he should have the particular historic sense in him, and he should know that he have to follow the patterns of the past, and whatever he is doing, it is also becoming past, and the future writers are going to see him and follow him. So he must have that sense in him. He gives the theory of impersonality, in which he says that an individual artist can only engage with the tradition at the expenditure of tremendous labor. I mean, in order to get the historic sense, he will have to read and focus on the past works, and that are lot of reading. That is a lot of reading. So he has to get that in historic sense and to engage with the tradition at the cost of tremendous labor. After that, he says an artist can only engage with tradition only through a process of continual self-sacrifice, a continual extinction of personality. Because T.S. Eliot was the one who was against subjectivity, and he wrote against the romantics, and he said that in order to write any particular work, one must do self-sacrifice. One must have to keep his own feelings to himself, and one should not reflect those feelings in the work. He says that the poet has not a personality to express but a particular medium. It means that the poet is a medium who gets his ideas, and who gets the pattern of things from the past, that he gets the structure of the 14 line structure of the poem from the past. He gets the feeling that he has to admire something and praise something in the sonnet. He gets this thing from the past. So he gets all these things from the past, and he is just a medium who has to use his own emotions and to mingle them, but should not reflect his own thoughts and ideas. He gets the pattern, the feeling from the past, and he has to just use them in a different way and then to portray that in his writings. The next new critic is I.A. Richard, who is famous for his experiment of distributing poems among his students. What I.A. Richard did was that he distributed poems among his students, and he did not give them any context about the poem. He removed the author, and he did not tell them that which age is this work belongs to. He removed every context from his readers, and asked them to interpret the poems. And what his students did was they gave their subjective responses based on their own emotions and feelings about the poem, or they just gave the plain meaning of the poem, unable to understand the figurative devices. So, I.A. Richard gave the concept of close reading. In close reading, we see all the figurative devices, we focus on the order of words, we see the syntax, we see the morphology, that why certain words are used and how many meanings they have, and what could be the possible interpretations of this poem. And by seeing all these figurative devices, he said he gave the concept of close reading. And close reading is the careful sustained interpretation of a brief passage of a text. Example, we also have the close reading of Islam, in which every word is seen from its origin till that how many meanings this word has, and what how these meanings relate with other relate with the meaning of other words, and how it gives a unified meaning. So that's how the close reading is done. In close reading, what is focused is that the ambiguities within the text are seen. It what the new critics focus that how many layers of meaning or interpretations of the text are there. They see the undercurrents of tone. They see that how sincere is the voice of the writer, and at what level he is writing. The new critics focus on the imagery, and they see that how it is able to, and how it helps to convey meaning, and how much symbolic is the imagery, and how original is the imagery. The new critics focus on the imagery, they see the tone, they see the ambiguity within the text, they focus on the tone, they see the skill with words, they see the wordplay, they see all those devices like assonance, alliteration, puns, innovation with form, rhythm, and other structures. And by focusing on all these devices, the new critics evaluate the overall merit of each text in terms of the above. For example, if we have a passage of text, and these are lines taken from the play of Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, and these are lines said by Brutus. There is a tide in the affairs of man, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune, omitted all the voyage of their life is bound to shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures. So these lines are taken from the play of Shakespeare, and these have so many devices. For example, the water imagery is used in the form of tide, flood, voyage, shallow, sea, afloat, current, and ventures. And the symbol of sea is used, and these symbol lead to two possible meanings. The first is that the sea can be controlled and it is predictable in the form of tides when we see the tide, but if we see overall the vastness of the sea, we see that it's unpredictable and it's open and it's uncontrolled. So these symbols can lead to two possible meanings, which leads to paradox, that what is the nature of the sea. Then ambiguity arises, that affairs of man are compared to the sea. So are the affairs of man controllable, or are they wild or boundless? By overall focusing on all these devices, we are conveyed with the unified meaning, and that meaning is that man act under the illusion of control, when in reality they have none. The tides of fate truly have power, and man must find a way to work within these confines. So the unified meaning is that the man have the illusion that he has the control of his affairs, but instead he is not, and he is the tides of fate have power over him. So that's how we see the all those devices, be it simile, or be it paradox or symbol or ambiguity or irony. With all those devices, we get to know that how they add to the meaning, and then we get a unified meaning out of it. I.A. Richard gives two uses of language. He says that the language is used for two purposes. The one is the scientific one, and the other one is the emotive one. He says that when we refer to the objects outside and we refer to the external world, then the scientific use of language is achieved. For example, if we say that the pencil is mine, so it means that the pencil is the external reality, and that how the scientific purpose is achieved, and this is justifiable. It can be proved true or either false, but that's how the truth in the scientific language is achieved. But when we refer to the emotive end of it, it means that the language is there to evoke a particular emotion in the reader. For example, if I say that heart on fire, so it it leads to the feeling of excitement into the readers, and it works to evoke particular emotion in the reader, and this is not justifiable, this is not testable, this cannot be proved true or false. So the IA Richard says that the truth in the emotive language, the truth in the when the language is used for emotive end, then the truth is achieved when it evokes particular emotion in the reader. And he says that through the uses of metaphors and puns, there are multiple meanings that arises and that creates ambiguity. And with those uses, the there is certain impression that is left on the reader. So he says that the use of fiction is the imaginative use of truth. That there is one belief, that is scientific belief, which is used for the scientific language, while there is emotive belief that works to leave an impact on the reader, and it is the imaginative use of truth. Thompson in 1930 he wrote the 7 types of ambiguity. He was the student of I.A. Richard, and with his permission, he worked on the works of Shakespeare, Milton, Pope, and on their works, he delineated the 7 types of ambiguity and how it arises. And with all those ambiguities, he said that these ambiguities reflect the complexity in the mind of author. These ambiguities express the psychological and social forces in the mind of the author, and this have the same impact upon the reader. In due to his work, he is also known as a deconstructionist, and also he is known as the new critic, because he celebrates the ambiguity. Then we have the particular term intentional fallacy, and this work was given by William Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley. William Wimsatt wrote it along with Beardsley in his book of the verbal icon in 1954. And in that particular essay, he said that it's a false belief that one can know the intention of the author. It's not possible for one to know the intention of the author, because the author may be dead, or even if you are referring to interview, he may not be telling the truth. And he also says that if we have to get the meaning, then a poem should not mean but be. We should not see the outside reference and the external reference in order to get the particular meaning. It should lie in the text. So the it's a false belief that one can judge the work based on the author's intention or belief. Rather, one should focus on the poem. And these are the very central concepts in the new criticism that does not that devalue the author as well as the reader. The next term is affective fallacy, and it was also used by the same person, William Wimsatt, and he gave the concept of affective fallacy. And affective fallacy refers to the error of evaluating a text through the emotional response of the reader. And the new critics said that we cannot refer to, or we cannot evaluate the text by the emotional response of the reader, because the readers come from varied backgrounds. They have different experiences, they have different literary tastes, they have different education. So we cannot judge any particular work based on the emotional response of the reader. In order to evaluate and understand the text, it is a it is a fallacy that we can rely on the reader. We should focus on the text in order to get the meaning. Conclusion. Now I would end this video with the difference of the Russian formalism and new criticism. Russian formalism emerged in Russia in 1914, while new criticism emerged in North America in 1940. One is the difference of the region. While both these theories share similar ideas, both are text centric and both give importance to meaning on the page, and both say that the text is self sufficient. But there is one difference, that the Russian formalism is theoretical while new criticism is practical. Russian formalism focus only on the form, while the new criticism it focus on the form as well as on the content. New critics they say that how the figurative devices have a particular meaning in the text, and how this meaning interrelate, and how it gives the unified meaning of the text. So that's a little difference between these two theories.